Hey, what's going on YouTube? Welcome to another League of Legends guide. Today, we're covering top lane Aatrox.
This battle will be my masterpiece.
Aatrox is a champion with great built-in sustain from his W and great attack speed steroids from both his passive and his ultimate. This passive then also acts like a built-in guardian angel and is great in both duels and teamfights. We're also a champion with very high sustain damage and a decent amount of CC, making us a rather strong top laner. With all of our damage, sustain, and built-in guardian angel, we make a great team fighter and a really good split pusher. Now, although Aatrox is still a really good champion and can carry games, there's a reason you don't see him too often. He does still have a bunch of cons. Aatrox really relies on his strong lifesteal, and the fact that all mid laners these days get a Morellonomicon, they can really shut that down. His Q can then be interrupted as well, and it's his only way of engaging onto an enemy, and it does have a really long cooldown, so if it does get interrupted, you're not really going to be able to make it to the fight. We are rather squishy early on as well, since we are building a bunch of lifesteal, and chain CC can then of course shut us down. If we're not getting life from our lifesteal, we're going to die really fast, and then we of course also are reliant on those auto attacks, so things like Frozen Heart can really shut that down as well. If picked in the right situation though, you can absolutely hard carry games. For my Masteries, I go 18 Ferocity and 12 Resolve, grabbing Fervor of Battle as my Keystone Mastery. Fervor works really well with Blade of the Ruined King if you are going for that in your build, but you of course can get Warlord's Bloodlust as well if you did prefer more sustain instead of more damage. In the rest of the tree, focus on getting as much damage as possible, and in the Resolve side, we want to get Runic Armor for increased healing. For my runes, I go Attack Damage Reds, Armor Yellows, Scaling Magic Resist Blues, and Attack Speed Quints. If you knew you were going against a hard AP matchup in the top lane, then you may want the flat Magic Resist instead of the Scaling. Some Aatrox players even go for full-on attack speed, and they take attack speed instead of attack damage as their reds, but as for myself, I prefer having some actual attack damage in my runes. For your first summoner spell, you'll want to take Flash. It's a very solid, reliable escape and can save you multiple times throughout the game. You can then use it offensively as well and combo it with your Q so you can engage from a rather far distance. Now my favorite summoner spell for my second slot would be Teleport. It gives you a lot of map pressure and will allow you to split push to your full potential since you'll be able to make it to team fights and objectives. Ignite is another viable option for solo queue. You won't have the strong map pressure you would have if you had Teleport, but you will instead have added kill pressure on the enemy top laner, and this is a great way to get snowballing. Alright, so let's kick off those abilities with your passive, Bloodwell. Whenever Aatrox consumes health, he stores it into his Bloodwell, which can hold between 105 and 870 based on level, health. The Bloodwell depletes by 2% per second if Aatrox hasn't dealt or received damage in the last 5 seconds. You then also gain a bunch of attack speed for every 1% in your Bloodwell, up to a maximum of between 30 and 55% bonus attack speed. Then, when you take fatal damage, Aatrox is cleansed of all debuffs, enters stasis and drains his Bloodwell, healing himself over the next 3 seconds. So this ability is both a passive attack speed steroid and your built-in guardian angel. All of your abilities cost you health, so anything you use will be stored into your Bloodwell and give you attack speed. The thing you also want to note about this ability is it does have a static cooldown, which is rather long, between 225 and 150 seconds, but it is a built-in GA, so it's kind of expected. It's a really strong passive and gives Aatrox a lot of strength. Now, your Q, Dark Flight. Aatrox dashes to the target area after a brief delay, dealing physical damage to nearby units upon landing, and knocking up all units in the epicenter for 1 second. So this has a 650 range, costs 10% of your current health, and has a cooldown of between 16 and 12 seconds. So this of course is your main way of engaging or escaping. I like to combo this ability with my E because the E does provide a slow, and getting people in the epicenter of this landing will be rather easy. It's a pretty decent ability, but we only need 1 point in it early on because it is primarily used as an engage. Our E and W do much more damage. So let's look at that W, which is called both Bloodthirst and Blood Price. Passively, Aatrox applies a bonus on-hit effect on every third hit against non-structures. So for the first one, Bloodthirst, Aatrox heals himself on hit. While Aatrox is below 50% maximum health, the heal is tripled. Then, when you toggle the ability, Aatrox consumes health to deal quadruple the amount as bonus on-hit physical damage. So this is rather simple to understand. If you need to sustain up, you want to have it toggled off and use Bloodthirst, And if you want to go for a high burst trade, then you want to have Blood Price. In most matchups, we max our E first, but in some, we really need the sustain, so we do actually max our W first, and pretty much always sit in Bloodthirst, unless we're going for an engage. It's a really strong ability, and considering all the attack speed we do get from our kit and our items, it will proc very often, and puts out a lot of damage. But now let's finish off our basic abilities with our E, Blades of Torment. So, Aatrox unleashes 2 converging energy waves in the target direction, dealing magic damage to all enemies hit and slowing them by 40%. So the thing to note about this ability is it is magic damage, so if people are going full armor against us to deal with our auto attacks, we can still deal a nice chunk of damage with this ability. In the lane, try to use this to harass the enemy as much as possible, and if you need to last hit from a safe distance, this can also get you that CS. It's by far our best ability for trading and last hitting, so we max this one first. That's of course unless we are in one of those matchups where we really need that sustain from our W. But now, our ultimate, Massacre. Aatrox draws in the blood of his foes, dealing magic damage to nearby enemy champions and filling his blood well by 20% of its maximum value for every enemy champion hit. Additionally, Aatrox gains bonus attack speed and attack range for 12 seconds, and that's between 40 and 60%. So, yet again, although we are an AD champion, this does do a nice chunk of magic damage, which is great for people itemizing against us with full armor. You'll of course have to be in melee range to get that damage to go off, so we can of course close that gap with our Q. But yeah, other than that, it is an attack speed steroid that does give us a little bit of attack range, and is fantastic in teamfights. You're of course still considered a melee champion, so stuff like Ravenous Hydra still works perfectly fine. For our skill order, we put a point into our ultimate whenever we can at 6, 11, and 16. Then we want to focus on maxing our E for its nice poke and trading damage, and then our W as it is some really nice sustain, and the third proc of the second toggle does a lot of damage in trades. Then of course we max our Q last, we just get the one early point at level 3 so we can actually engage and escape. As previously mentioned, generally we like to max our E almost always, but if we are in a really hard matchup and we need as much sustain as possible, then we can max our W first instead. For our main burst combo here, we start by landing our Blades of Torment on the enemy to apply our slow. We then want to jump on the enemy with Dark Flight, and we want to aim to have them in the epicenter so they get knocked up for 1 second. If we did go for a Ravenous Hydra, we want to use that activate as soon as we do land, and then we want to hit the enemy until we get our Blood Price proc. If you've done it as efficiently as possible, your next basic attack when you do go in for that jump will actually be that Blood Price proc. Then activate your Massacre and hit the enemy as much as you can with those empowered auto attacks. You can also save your Dark Flight if you're already on the enemy for when you're trying to escape or to get back onto them. The slow from Blades of Torment is pretty solid, so if you can walk up to them safely, then go for it, but if not, go for that high burst instant combo. Your early game is pretty decent since you have high base damages and solid sustain. Trade as much as you can with your Blades of Torment and your Blood Price proc. When you start to have the advantage, you'll want to be more aggressive and jump onto them with a Dark Flight to knock them up and add more damage. When you need to sustain in lane, make sure you're using the Bloodthirst part of your W toggle. I only really toggle it to Blood Price when I'm going in for a quick trade or all in. Then finally, if you do manage to get the top laner to back, make sure you shove that minion wave so they miss a lot of XP and gold. If you're winning the lane in the mid game, try to get down that top lane tower as quick as you can so you can open up some of the map. At this point, you have the option of split pushing to put out a ton of pressure on the map, or roaming. If no one on the enemy team can 1v1 you, then generally I like to get some deep wards and start that split push. Now, if you are split pushing, make sure you have teleport available and show up when you're needed to a team fight or an objective. Roaming is also very effective on Aatrox. He has a knockup from his Dark Flight and a slow from his Blades of Torment with tons of damage as well. Use these tools to help your other lanes. In late game teamfights, you'll need to either dive onto the enemy backline and kill their carries, or peel for your AD carry. Generally, you'll want to get onto the enemy backline with Dark Flight, but if your AD carry is the only one on your team doing well, then you don't really have an option but to protect them so they can get out their damage. Try and land your Blades of Torment on multiple targets so they're slowed, and your teammates will have a much easier time kiting. If you then happen to win a team fight, make sure you follow up with either a tower, dragon, baron, or maybe even an inhibitor, or the game. With the phases of the game covered, let's look at some hard matchups, and we're going to start with Darius. He's a champion that's very hard to outtrade because of his kit and his passive bleed. You'll want to keep harassing him during the lane with your Blades of Torment and go for small engagements when his Decimate and Crippling Strike are on cooldown. Do not get involved in long trades where he can stack his bleeds. Teemo is straight up cancer for melee top laners that rely on auto attacks, and that's you. The best you can do here when playing against a good Teemo player is to pick up as much farm and play very passively. Here you're going to have the option of maxing your Blades of Torment first for poke or your Bloodthirst for sustain. It's up to you. Next up is Malphite, and he's really hard because you won't do too much damage against him with your auto attack since he masses armor and of course scales off it as well, so he'll deal a lot of damage. Remember, however, that Blades of Torment and Massacre do deal magic damage, so you're still going to be able to deal some decent damage. So let's look at some more hard matchups and start with Riven, who is one of your main counters. She can constantly stop the poke from your Blades of Torment with her shield and deals a ton of damage with her broken wings and auto attacks. Then of course there is her stun, and if she catches you in it and you don't have Dark Flight, you're probably dead. Pick up whatever farm you can, and you may want to start with Cloth in 5 pots. Well, speaking of starting with armor and pots, Pantheon. You have to be careful against him early on because of his damn spears. Try to survive the lane as much as you can using your Bloodthirst to sustain in the lane, and once you get some lifesteal and armor, it becomes a much easier matchup. Last here we have Renekton, and he's a big time lane bully, and you have to be very careful early on. Usually you only want to trade with him when you have a Blood Price proc ready, and you have Blades of Torment to help you disengage from him after. Start trading more often when you do have lifesteal. So now let's finish this thing off with our item build, and we can start with either Adoran's Blade, Health Potion, and Warding Totem in a normal matchup, against High Harass, Adoran's Shield, Health Potion, and Warding Totem, or when we're against a hard AD matchup like Riven or Pantheon, we can take Cloth Armor, Health Potions, and a Warding Totem. So for our core build, we have the Ravenous Hydra, Blade of the Ruined King, and our choice of boots. I usually like to get both of these items, but sometimes you do need to get some tankiness first, but generally, they'll be both in my build. For our boots, we have Ninja Tabbies against armor, Merc Treads against AP and CC, or if we want some more attack speed for full out carry, we could get the Berserker Greaves. So our item pool is really large, and I'm only going to touch on my favorite items here. But first, for sure, is Spirit Visage, since it does increase your healing, and since you have a lot of lifesteal, it is a fantastic item on Aatrox, and I almost always get it. Randuin's, Deadman's Plate, and Thornmail are all excellent armor picks, and I'll take Randuin's if I want reduced crit damage, Deadman's Plate for added mobility, and Thornmail if I do have a decent health pool already, and I want to return some damage. Maw and Sterak's are then very great items as well, as they do provide you shields. Maw is great against high AP burst, and Sterak's is just great against normal teams. Guardian Angel is a pretty awesome item as well, considering you can come back to life twice if you do have your passive available, and it's pretty damn OP. If you want to add even more sustain, we could get Death's Dance or a Bloodthirster. Both are great items, but with the Ravenous Hydra and the Blade of the Ruined King, generally we don't need that much lifesteal. Ginsu's is actually a really strong item on Aatrox as well, because he does have a lot of attack speed, can get this item to stack insanely fast, and it will output a lot of extra damage. It's great for a hard carry build. So for our normal full build, we'll take our core, get those Merc Treads, then a Randuin's for some nice armor, Spirit Visage because it's brokenly OP on Aatrox, and finish it off with a Deadman's Plate. You'll do an absolute ton of damage, have a ridiculous amount of sustain, and very tanky stats. For the hard carry build, we'll take that core again, get those Berserker Greaves, Spirit Visage because you always have to honestly, Randuin's yet again, and then finish it off with that Ginsu's. Ginsu's may sound a little bit weird to you guys, but honestly, try it. It does so much damage, it's kind of stupid. But that covers everything for my top lane Aatrox guide. I would like to thank you guys for watching. If you guys did enjoy, you can always thumb it up. And if you are new here or really enjoyed the video, you could always subscribe. For a full list of my guides, you can go to my website, egamingtv.com, and you can also follow me on Twitter at egaming_TV, which is where I do skin giveaways. I'm also working on co-hosting a podcast, so if you are interested in applying to join that, that's also in the video description. But other than that, thank you guys a ton for watching the video. I really hope you enjoyed it and learned something, and I will see you guys in the next champion guide. Peace!
Oh why, I'm killing inside, you still in my mind. Distractions are killing my vibe, and not the magazine. My agony is riddled in lines, I'm riddled in lines. And nines bust like 10 at a time, but he's from cop hands. Heads popping open like pop cans. Televised to entertain, to thank us all for watching. We click, shared, and clock in, just to chase a dollar or a dream. There's no in-between option.